Welcome to Phacilitate's digital content platform. We're here in Miami at our annual event, and I'm sitting next to Matthew Durdy, Chief Business Officer for Cell Gene Therapy Catapult. You're based in the UK. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting us.
So obviously there's been some big news this week. We're here in January. What does the UK biotech industry, the sector, look like post-Brexit?
So, I mean, Brexit was not part of our strategic plan, clearly, but it's not necessarily the end of the world, we don't think. The sky hasn't fallen in. I think, one of the things you must look at to start with is the fundamentals of what makes a good biotherapeutic and a healthcare industry, and those are still there. So, the world still has a very strong academic base. The UK has a very strong academic base. There's still a very strong healthcare industry with a strong healthcare need, and all of those things make good fundamentals. But clearly some things will change. The UK has benefited from a mutual relationship with Europe where we've worked together scientifically and cooperatively, and that has been driven by grant funding. That scenario will change. I don't think the cooperations will go away. The relationships are strong, but the funding mechanism will change. But I think the change will be positive in that the discussions that are going ahead now are around, rather than multilateral European relationships on funding, a number of bilateral relationships around the world. So for instance, the UK funding for cooperation and collaboration with other countries, the US, for instance, or China or Australia. So I think you're going to see a much broadening of that cooperative relationship across the world, which could be very, very positive, I think.
Oh, excellent. So if I'm an academic group and I've got an exciting idea and a potentially novel therapeutic in the pipeline or something I've been working on, what is almost the step-by-step process for upscaling it or bringing it to clinical trials?
So we have a philosophy around operation in this way at the Catapult that's very much driven by the commercial agenda. So we say start with the end in mind, basically, and we think there are three legs towards designing the product, and you must get a very early understanding. It can be loose, but a very early understanding of what you think the product is that you're going to develop, because that determines the agenda for clinical trial, for process development work. And the three legs of that thought process are, first of all, starting with the discussion about how it will fit into the payment arena, what the payers want, the payers need, how it will be used from a healthcare economic perspective. And that starts to inform the opportunity, the size of the opportunity from an economic perspective. The second leg is, of course, the very important scientific and clinical and regulatory development, which you've got to work through. And then the third leg is the particularly pertinent in the cell and gene therapy industry, where these things are novel, the manufacturing processes and the analytical processes that support that. And those three legs need to be intertwined to create a target product profile that gives you an understanding of where you're going. And it's the coordinated development of those three together that means that you will have a very efficient development of a therapeutic, which has a much higher probability of being taken up by the industry, which ultimately is what you want to get it into global use. So,
and what would be the support then that Catapult can give to that to develop that product profile?
So the Catapult's mandate is to accelerate the growth of the industry. So the way we set ourselves up is we said, different companies, different organizations are going to need different things, and they will cover the whole spectrum of the development of cell and gene therapies. So we can help in all areas, and we have a team internally where we run our own programs, and that means that in order to run our own programs, we have to have all of those skills, and we practice all of those skills. But if I group them into some broad groups, they follow to some extent our own philosophy that I just described, in terms of we have a healthcare economics team that can help you understand the position of your potential science or product, if it's that far developed, in the marketplace. We have a clinical and regulatory team who can advise you on how to quickly establish and accelerate your clinical trials. And we have a process development and analytical team who are able to then go on and really help you get established in bringing down the cost of goods. And much of our focus technologically over the next few years is going to be around intelligent manufacture and automation, helping people to make that leap from a potentially very robust process, but to a large-scale process if necessary for it to be large-scale, but an economically very strong process too. There's another element of what we do in terms of our business model. We are developing a manufacturing center, and that's really focused on the interrelationship between the investment community and the development of the biotherapeutics or cell and gene therapy industry. Because what you're seeing is the manufacturing processes are very important sources of intellectual property at the moment, and people learn a lot and develop a lot with that. And we're seeing some groups of corporates, small corporates, SMEs, who are saying, you know what, we don't want to let go of that right now. We want to do it for ourselves. However, we do not want to build a factory. We don't want to build and run a factory and take on those liabilities. And you're also seeing venture capitalists, funders saying, we want to pay for the science, we don't want to pay for factories. So at the Catapult, we have developed a manufacturing facility that has got a number of highly segregated suites where we manage the creation of the GMP environment, but companies can come in and develop and run their own GMP processes within that environment. So reducing the capital outlay, but allowing them to have control of their processes.
Can you share maybe one or two examples of that have proven really successful, this kind of approach?
So yeah, I mean, some examples of some of the things that we've done. Remember that our role is to help the industry grow. So Asterias Biotherapeutics, a US company, we're working with them to help them develop the processes, and then the teams work very closely together to develop a large-scale manufacturing process for their VAC2 product, where they have leveraged a platform that we had developed for the large-scale manufacture of pluripotent cells, and we are tailoring that to their requirements. So that accelerates their development by 2 or 3 years and gives them access to all our expertise to run larger-scale clinical trials. At another end of the spectrum, we identified that there was a gap in the infrastructure around manufacturing and supply chain, where at the end of the process, the thawing of the vials in the clinic was an uncontrolled process, and it's a fundamental part of that data chain. So we've worked with a company who have developed with us a thawing device that is linked to the Internet of Things, so that the data from the thawing is highly controlled and goes back to a central release point, which solves one of the problems for a number of companies who have been entering clinical trials and thinking about what their business model would look like in the future.
It's some really interesting work, and I think it draws very parallel to the development of the industry and certainly development of this science as it builds towards developing therapies that can change modern medicine. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thank you very much.
Everything.